Alright, so we have an S8 screen here that has a little bit of damage down here in the bottom right, so hopefully that won't affect things in the freezer. You can see that everything is touching properly. So you're going to strip it down to this point. There's a few things that you need to kind of recognize and take out. Down here at this headphone jack, there's this little bracket here. That needs to come out, and you want to save that because you're going to put that in a little bit. The vibrator motor speaker, those can stay in. Sometimes they have a little plastic piece that's between this little groove here, and we should take that out so that Joshua Orange's mold can fit in there. Next thing we want to do is we're going to want to get all this adhesive out so that Josh's mold can fit in here nicely as well. Alright, so we went ahead and tested it, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring this over to the freezer. So they're going to sit in this freezer for about 4 minutes until you hear a pop. The way that this one is broken is we have pretty big breaks at the top and the bottom, so we're likely to get a big chunk that's going to break off, and then we're going to have to hit these sides. So we'll wipe down the inside of the freezer. Make sure there's no glass particles on there. We're going to push this down. We're going to give a little weight, whatever you guys have in your office, to hold this down. So we're going to go ahead and set a timer. Just check out the time here. We're at 52, so we'll let it sit for about 4 minutes and see if we hear any pops. If we don't, we'll check it out. Leave it in for at least up to 5 minutes, but then after that, if you don't hear any pops, you kind of want to go at it. So if you guys were doing this in an assembly line fashion, at this point in time, you could be breaking down your next phone and getting it ready to go in the freezer. So on this particular one, it won't get all the way up to the temperature where this light will start blinking. So this one's based on time. We'll be modifying the software here soon so that it should blink when it hits the proper temperature for a Samsung. This is a credit-free system here. Normally, before you would put something in the app, you would want to go through the app process that indicates that you want to put something into the freezer. To do that, you would go to your dashboard. You would hit freezer. Oops. This is going to scan for devices. Our freezer has not been connected since it's credit-free, but the 001 is going to be what the freezer is. It would say connected. We would go to Samsung S8. You're gonna get this freezer boost, and that's gonna kick up the cold coldness of the freezer essentially. And then you would hit confirm. It says it gets cold, so you need to have gloves on, and then you would hit start process, which that just shut our freezer off. Should be alright still. So this one might take a minute longer then, since we accidentally just shut the freezer off. The credit-free system doesn't exactly like you telling it to boot on and off. So you can hear it start to creak already. We're at about 2.5 minutes or so. I'll go ahead and get prepared by putting a glove on. So these are the gloves that come with the system here. I'm right-handed, so I usually put one on my left hand so I can hold it with the left hand and then work with things with my right. So we heard a nice good pop there. So I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds to see if we get a secondary pop or not. That was right at about 3 minutes or so when we heard that, so. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take this off. You can see that almost all of this glass came off automatically on its own. These areas, I'm just going to hit real quickly to break off what's there. If you keep hitting at it and you're not getting those areas, you just need to stop, because once it starts to warm up, if you keep beating at it, it'll break the display off with it. So this one came out pretty well. Hopefully that area that was damaged down there in that corner doesn't get more damaged. Alright, so we're going to bring this over to the heat pad. And I'm just going to put it face down and try and get it back to about room temperature for us. I have this silicone mat here, so even if it starts to warm up, it'll peel up. If you're using like one of the blue mats or something like that, and you start to put it down here, if you forget about it, it's going to be really hard to peel up and you could damage the display. So you just need to pay attention when you're doing this part to not let it overheat on you. So you can see the frost is starting to dissipate on the edges here. We still have some up in this area, so. Whenever you're working with this process, you want to be careful not to put too much pressure down in this flex area. Sometimes you can forget about it if you're holding or pushing something, so just be aware. Alright, and I feel pretty comfortable that we're about at room temperature right now. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is pull the top and bottom adhesive off. You want to make sure you're always going away and not towards when you're doing things like this. Again, not putting any pressure on this flex cable area. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna lay some sheets on top of this. You want them to be as flat as possible, including the edges here. And then we have our 3M Citrus Spray adhesive remover. And we're just going to spray this down until it's wet. And we're going to let this sit for about a minute or two and then give it a spray again. So it's starting to lose some of its liquid that's on there, so I'm going to go and give it another spray. We really want to let the chemical do the work here. So the longer we wait, the better it'll turn out. Not sure if that's in frame of that up there or not. If I start to lift this up, you'll see that the way this adhesive looks is starting to get a little orange peel-like, and that's what you're going for. So I'm just gonna see what, so it still needs a little bit longer. This should peel up in a nice sheet. So I'm just gonna give this a spray straight to it. So if you were working on multiple at a time, this is the point in time where you could probably break your next screen. So that's getting better. You can see how that's sort of coming up now. But I think one more shot of spray and letting it dry will probably be perfect. So in that time frame, there's still a little bit of adhesive that's left here at the top from the adhesive strip, so I'm going to get that off. So you can see how it's coming off in a nice sheet now. So I'm stopping about a half a centimeter or so before the end where this flex cable is, because that area is just going to require a little bit more care and attention. Go ahead and give this another spray while I'm working on it, just to help it out a little bit. So we're going to focus down on this flex area now. I'm just going to let the blade do the work, not putting much pressure down at all. that's soaking into that bottom there. I'm just going to hit these other areas of the screen. Sometimes I use my nail a little bit when I'm working in here at these spots that this is coming off much nicer now that we got another spray on there and let it set for another few minutes. We're gonna hit that one more time while we finish the rest of the screen. So when I do these, I wrap it around my finger and then kind of tuck, and it gives me like a nice flat area. And if you have any spots that are tough to get off at this point, you can take it and use the blade to keep scratching that area. This is our area here that was a little damaged on this screen, so we're just going to try and be careful. Using my nail, not putting too much pressure. And overall, we are looking pretty good right now. So I'm just going to try and get as much extra goop in these tops and corners as I can. If you've got stuff in the edge here, sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. You have to be very careful. You don't want to move around and push up at all because you can split the display that way. So just a back and forth movement. You want to make sure there's no shards of glass in between here, because if you try and push that glass down, that will damage the display there as well. See, we had a shard of glass right here. shard of glass in there. And then we got one up here. So depending on how it's broken, if it's not broken bad at all, that probably won't be an issue. But if it's really shattered along one of these sides of the corners, that's definitely something that you want to pay attention to. All right. So the next thing is we're going to take our denatured alcohol. And we're just going to get the oily residue off from that 3M adhesive remover. Doesn't need to be perfect right now because we're not doing anything with it. This will just really show you if you have any spots that still need to be taken care of. This one looks good. So the next phase is we're going to put OCA to glass. So we have our glass here. Some OCA. So you can see the indentations if we get the right angle in this display here. These displays are malleable and they'll bend in and out. And that's why Joshua Orange's mold, which is right here, fits nicely inside of this area as it keeps pressure up on this screen. So when we're laminating, this won't dip down under vacuum and hold a big bubble in there. So we're going to go ahead and give a shout out to OCA Master. We're using their mold for alignment at this point in time. We haven't decided if that's what we'll do moving forward. The alignment is actually quite easy to the glass just on a rubber mold because it fits perfectly and you can just align it and set it down. But theirs does pretty well every time for this particular process, so we're just going to use theirs. Alright, so we pull the top layer of the glass off. And we'll get some alcohol on here. I'm just going to wipe down these strips so there's no dust on them. For this first process, has a little groove that this glass will fit in. I'm going to give it a good push down. So I'm going to go ahead and set up our system here so that it's ready for this as soon as we're done. On this. And we're going to go to dashboard, screen vac. That one's taking a little bit longer. All right. Samsung S8. Now for this first process, we'll be adding something that just says OCA to glass, but for now we're just going to do full process. And it only needs about 2 to 3 minutes of air pressure. So your full process selected, 3 minutes. And then we're going to be ready to start this process here. So what we'll do is we'll grab an OCA. It's quite simple. You want the groove, one side of this is going to have a groove. It's going to be facing down because you're taking this top sheet off. So we'll just make sure this is aligned. You would be doing this under a dust-free environment normally. Just make sure this is still good. So then I flip this over. Actually, no, don't. So you just want a little touch in the center here. Then I use my fingernail to lift off on it. You just want to make sure this is really nicely aligned. And then on our app, we're ready to go, so we're going to close this lid. And then down on the app, we're just going to hit start process. So you should hear a click. It's going to go through a couple different phases, and when that comes out, that'll be ready to go. Alright, so we're waiting for this to open. We'll go ahead and test the screen.
It's always a good sigh of relief.
Yeah. Still seems to be touching normal. All right. So since we're doing this one in frame, we'll grab Josh's mold here. Make sure there's nothing, no glass or anything that might obstruct something that's going on in here. And I'll make sure that this is sitting out. And go ahead and just lock it in. Make sure when you're pushing to lock this in that you don't push down by this flex cable. It's nice and locked. And I'll get it clean again with the denatured alcohol. So you'll see at the top of these, when you get in here, there's some little rubber that holds the screen. If you have any of them that are pushing up a lot, I try and poke them through, but you have to be really careful not to push against this part of the display there, because it can and will damage it. Different people have different methods for this. Alright, so that OCA is about to come up there. Alright. So after an OCA on a glass comes up, you have about 10 minutes you can use it before bubbles start coming back on the edge of the screen. So that came out really nicely. Make sure it looks aligned, and it does. So go ahead and set that down and get that ready to go on the display. Totally just pushed on the flex. Alright, so we'll grab our CX2 spray here. Sort of like what we used to put on ZAGG screen protectors to let the screen protector not adhere immediately. Same sort of concept where it allows the bubbles to kind of flow out of the OCA. So I'm really going to rub down the edges with plenty of denatured alcohol. Once we put this in the system, it's going to be Josh from Orange's mold on the bottom, the display, the glass, and then a piece of this, what we call magic foam on top. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go ahead and set the system up to be ready to go. Again, I'm looking for the RN for this one. Yours might say screen vac. Samsung S8. We're going to leave this at the 7 minutes. For this one, we're going to do Samsung settings. So what that does is it drops down and it does all the vacuum settings and compression settings except for air compression. So it'll open, it'll allow us to push any bubbles out that we might need to push out, and then close for air pressure. Alright, so now as soon as we get this glass on, we're ready to go. This one here is missing the ear speaker mesh, so that would fall out when it was frozen. So I'm going to find that. Alright. Some of them fall out, some of them don't, so that is something you want to pay attention to. So we have that back in its place now. I'm going to get a nice fresh cloth. So I'll go ahead and prime this. Just make sure there's no air in there so we get a nice fine mist out of it. Normally this would be done in a dust-free enclosure. That is looking pretty good. So I will get a green sticky. Be ready to peel that back. So I'm just going to give this 2 shots of the spray, and then I'm going to align this glass down. So when I'm aligning this, first thing I'm aligning is the ear speaker mesh with the hole in the glass, and then I'm looking from straight overhead, and all I want to do is just drop this into its place so everything is aligned. I'm not wanting to push down in a lot of areas. I might give a little push at the top and bottom just to make sure that it doesn't slide around, but that's about it. So 2 sprays of that. Quickly peel. Align the top. Little push top and bottom, that's it. Keeping Joshua Orange's mold here. And put this down, put the mat on top. Back to our app, which is now ready to go. We won't cut this part so you guys can see the different stages of the Samsung process. So this first process takes about 3 minutes. The light's kind of sketchy on this system. It's been shipped all over the US 5 times now. But normally this light would start blinking when it's ready to open for you to push the bubbles out, and then you would just push the button again to close it to finish the second part of the process. When it comes out of here for the first time, it should be about 90%. We're at 332 right now, which will show you about the time frame for the process. So right now, if I was doing these in succession, I would start cleaning the other one, and by the time this whole process is done, the next one would be ready to drop in the bed. Should pop open if it's ready. So that's what we're looking right now with no air pressure at all. This one actually came out very nice. Sometimes there's bubbles at the top and bottom of this display, and the process of this coming up now is to sit here and to try and push these air bubbles that would be in the top out. So since there aren't any there, what we're going to do, we're just going to set it on this heat pad for about a minute, and then we'll put it back in the system for the final phase. Heat pad right now is set to 95. 90 would probably be fine as well. So now, all I'm doing is just hitting the button on top to finish the face. We're at 3:37 right now, so this process will take about 7 minutes is what we had it set to. If you were to do a lot of these in bulk, you certainly can put multiple of these screens in the system at a time for this last final phase. I think for Samsungs you could have about 2 or 3 inside of the system if you were looking to speed processes up. The next video that we'll do after this will probably be on the same screen. and then we'll just be showing you how to do it out of frame. Alright, looks pretty good. There's one itty bitty bubble in the center here, which we'll get out by just running through air pressure again. That one's not locked in, so that'll definitely come out. Go ahead and test this to make sure that everything is working properly. Overall, that came out really nicely. Touch still seems to be working good. This glass was already cracked. But, so I'll go ahead and drop this down into the autoclave again, and then we'll add a picture on here that shows you guys what everything looks like.